All right, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And the whole pandemic drama continues. We just have the first case of the Omicron virus in San Francisco, with the mayors having a press conference as we speak here on this Wednesday, the recording of Carnivore Bites. Your take on that, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, it's no surprise that the virus keeps mutating. That's what viruses do. In fact, right after Biden put in place the travel ban from South African countries, a spokesperson for the Gangone Medical Center at NYU made a statement that basically said virtually every virus we've ever seen mutates, and as it does, each mutation actually gets
weaker,
less virulent. So this could actually be a good thing. They're speculating that it's very contagious, but most people will have mild to no symptoms, which will go a long way to boosting natural immunity, which
I would
every
agree.
study has shown that that's, the way to go. Natural immunity is much stronger than any of the vaccines or medications we have.
Yes, but of course, it's another. How could Dr. Fauci miss an opportunity to cause some hysteria and anxiety in the American public? Of course, he had a press conference, and an interesting segment of that or aspect of that, he was asked about the closing of certain travel from Africa and maybe possibly others. But what he avoided was the open borders of the Biden administration. It's kind of doesn't make any sense to me and to any sane person. You're closing down travel, but you have an open southern border. Hello, McFly.
Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. To put a travel ban in place, these folks can just as easily fly to South America and now walk across our borders. So the travel ban doesn't actually do anything.
Yes. But speaking of Fauci, he was on the air on the news shows last Sunday's news cycle. Again, I'm being asked puffball questions because there's there's a whole fan base in the mainstream media, and he basically came out with a statement that I am science and the Republicans are liars. You get a little bit of an inflated ego, my friend?
Just a little bit. You really have to look at Fauci's history, because not only has he been wrong most of the times with coronavirus, Fauci has a long history of being wrong, going back to the 80s when he announced that you could catch AIDS from somebody being in your house that had AIDS.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a long history, I think, and I'd like your take on this, that, he's in his 80s, and he is, it sounds perverse, but I think he's really enjoying his final years as he's a rock star. He doesn't want to give up that mantle. I mean, the Stones keep touring, and so does he.
No, this is very true. Fauci is enjoying the spotlight. It's the same thing that happened with Andrew Cuomo. He came out, he's a rock star with how he's dealing with COVID. He got himself a book deal. But when you scratch below the surface, there's nothing there. Neither Fauci nor Cuomo knew what they were talking about. They've done more harm than good. And this is all about feeding their egos.
No question. And speaking of the Cuomos, looks like Chrissy Boy might be out at CNN. He's not officially, but he's certainly under suspension. A couple things about that. Your comment on on that whole scenario, but another comment is, how the heck did he get that job to begin with? Dumber than rocks, has no flair, no insight. You're talking about vanilla on steroids. And he's got a job, obviously, through his connections. He also went to Yale, like I went to the moon. Comment on all this. Fascinating to me.
Well, Cuomo was hired by Jeff Zucker when Jeff Zucker was trying to remake the network.
Oh, God.
And we've talked about Zucker ad infinitum. He, really doesn't know what he's doing. Cuomo had a lot of contacts. He was able to get the job that way. Now, the liberal press has even turned against him, saying, no, he should be fired for what he did. Officially, he is under an indefinite suspension. But I have heard from a number of people saying they don't expect him to come back. Now, I'm hoping that this is just part one of a turnaround, because for those of our listeners that don't know, CNN is part of Warner Media. Warner Media was just bought by Discovery Networks a little while ago.
Yep.
A couple of days ago, excuse me, John Malone, who is the main shareholder in Liberty Media, Discovery Networks, all of that, he's essentially the guy that bought Warner Media. He gave an interview to CNBC and said point blank, CNN has no actual journalists. This is the new owner of the network saying
I
this.
heard that, and I think it was music to my ears, because how did that shit show last Zucker? What? I mean, I remember CNN. I remember when I first moved back to Connecticut, and I used to watch Crossfire, Larry King. It was a good network. I mean, reliable. It was the place to go.
Yes.
How the heck, explain to me, you've been in media, how the heck, journalism, how the heck did this happen? And how does Zucker, I mean, is it like just in business, you recycle the same people just because they're VPs? I mean, the guy's got no talent for anything.
No, and we've talked about Zucker before. He had great success at NBC with the Today Show. He dominated the morning space. And then as they promoted him, he failed, and he kept failing upwards until CNN hired him to run the network. Well, I think it's probably a case of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. He had the right contacts, but I think his run is going to come to an end, because he is responsible for bringing Chris Cuomo onto the network. He is responsible for allowing Chris Cuomo to cover his brother's story.
His butt,
So
yes.
I think he's gone a step too far. I think John Malone is probably going to do away with him. That John Malone, again, for our listeners that are not familiar with him, he has been a major force in television for approximately 40 years at this point. He ran cable companies. He ran he's owned networks. So this is someone who is very powerful in the industry, and I don't think he's going to put up with what CNN has become.
Last little bit before, we don't want to drag this on because I don't think it's worthy of our attention with all the other stuff going on, but you got to wonder. I mean, I think initially, you can probably know better than I do, I think CNN was part of the AT&T corporate entity. How did this shit show go on for, I mean, you're talking like almost 10 years of shit and horrible ratings. If it was MSNBC, like Rachel Maddow, I think that's shit, but she gets good ratings. I mean, this is a combination of horrible journalism or lack thereof and shitty ratings. I mean, who wins? How did it go on so long?
That's actually was the problem, was he didn't have shitty ratings. He was the top rated show on CNN. So they've been falling in the ratings so far. They didn't dare do anything against him.
Oh, no, I'm talking about CNN overall. How did this crap happen? I mean, you're talking about a destruction of a network.
Part of it is the woke bullshit that has gone on, same with MSNBC. But honestly, a big part of it is that Time Warner was bought by AT&T. AT&T had no idea how to run media, which is why they ultimately sold it. It was a matter of I wouldn't say malfeasance, corporate ineptitude combined with a woke agenda on the part of CNN.
I think you've got to summarize that. Huge, huge thing going on as we speak. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments that will possibly affect Roe versus Wade. Huge ramifications socially and politically. Personally, I don't think it's a good thing for the Republican agenda. It's a rallying cry.
If they overturn Roe versus Wade, I don't think it'll go well for the Republicans. And there have already been threats of riots if that happens, which
of course
seems now seems to be the liberal mantra is
I mean,
do what we say or we're going to riot.
Yeah, anything
what
anything happens, there's a riot. Why not?
What most people don't seem to be paying attention to is that this is not an end all and be all for abortion. First of all, let's assume Roe v. Wade gets overturned. That doesn't make abortion illegal. What it does is it says every state has the right to make their own abortion laws. Well, for a large part of the country, that means no change. So this is
but you know how the media is going to. I understand
yes,
that, but the optics.
The media is going to go crazy over it because they have their agenda, which apparently has nothing to do with the truth. Now, here's the thing, though. The Supreme Court can actually uphold the Mississippi law and not overturn Roe v. Wade, because the question is one of viability. Roe v. Wade, which was decided 50 years ago,
yes,
said you could not abort a fetus after it is viable. Well, viability has changed. Technology has changed. So babies are now viable earlier.
Well, also, I think it's a two-edged sword there. Yes, babies are viable earlier, but laws, in liberal states, especially like Virginia, have extended, let's just say, the deadline or the window of opportunity, if you'd like to call, which is, some of it is troubling to say the least. So you have two things going on, don't you?
You do. And actually, there's a third factor that enters into it. The Mississippi law bans abortions after 15 weeks. Okay, now we talked briefly about the law that was passed in Texas, which was like 6 weeks. It was ridiculous. But 15 weeks is well into the second trimester. So you're not really talking about much of a limit. Most places already limit in the, during the second trimester. So there's not that much of a change. People are afraid that Roe v. Wade will be overturned, and they're afraid of that not for any real reason, but because the media has convinced them that if Roe v. Wade goes away, then, oh my God, you're not going to be able to get a legal abortion. And that's not true.
I think there'll be riots, and I think there'll be a renewed push for stacking the courts. I think it doesn't bode well for many things. So I also, by the way, talking about, mistruths, well, the media can convince, I guess, the mass parts or large segments of the population about anything. They convinced them that Joe Biden wasn't senile. I mean, that's a feat.
Yes.
We always talk about the incompetent media. That's highly competent. I mean, how do you convert Weekend at Bernie's to Einstein is a trick that Houdini can never do.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing what has gone on with the media. And I have seen a couple of reports on this, but more and more people are turning to foreign media because CNN and MSNBC have absolutely no credibility anymore. We've seen that in their ratings. Both of them are plummeting. But you're seeing people actually go online and go to the foreign press because they are reporting on Biden more accurately, and they're
I've done
actually
it
reporting
myself.
on American issues more accurately than our own media.
I think that's a fascinating point because it's something I've done. That doesn't make it fascinating, but you see the the disconnect between what we're being fed, the shit show we're being fed in America, to what's going on in the. I mean, it's they laugh at Biden. I mean, there's segments that look like something out of Monty Python, I should say, that he's told to step to the blue dot, and he goes to like a blue podium. It's like, whoa, dude. So I think that's fascinating and something that's really interesting to me that you brought up. Yes, with the seamlessness of the internet, I wonder if that's going to be more and more of a phenomenon. Because I think people, you look at CNN's ratings, you look at them. I mean, the ratings are awful, so people have to some degree caught on.
Yes, they have. They're getting their news from different sources. And that's important. We need to see different points of view. You and I have talked about this for well over a decade, how people are caught in an echo chamber just watching news that they agree with. Well, fortunately, people have now realized CNN and MSNBC are not news organizations. I mean,
Their
take a look
entertainment.
take a look at the two of them. Literally, you just had the owner of CNN say they don't have any journalists, and you had a court of law say Rachel Maddow's not a journalist. She just talks opinion. So you've actually got people coming out saying, no, this is not news. So the populace is going to other sources to find their news. Now, this is good and bad. It's good because the American people are starting to wake up. They're starting to see what's been going on with the media. And again, we've talked about this. You've got Bill Maher coming out against it. You've got Jon Stewart, well-known liberals, talking heads going, all right, you know what? We've gone too far. We need to pull back. The bad part about this is that they're because Americans aren't doing this on a regular basis yet, the rest of the world knows more about America than we do. And what they know isn't good. That's why Russia is stepping up their efforts. China is stepping up their efforts because across the world, we have no credibility. And the rest of the world knew it before the left wing media here dared to report on it.
And they really haven't reported. And I think that's a great bit of information. Speaking of media, social media seems to be in somewhat of a upheaval, to say the least.
Yeah, Jack Dorsey has stepped down as CEO of Twitter. I don't know what his reasoning is. He said a couple of things that really didn't make sense, but he wanted to make sure everybody knew that it was his decision. The fact of the matter
that
is,
usually means it's not.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, there have been activist shareholders that have been trying to get him out for a while now. So I don't know if it really was his decision. What it means for the platform, actually, I think it's going to be a disaster because the new CEO, they've already unearthed previous tweets of his where he's saying that why should he make any differentiation between white and racist?
Yeah. Not it's the whole, and there's also been some unrest at Facebook as well.
Yeah, Facebook actually, there's been unrest at Facebook for a long time.
Increasing though.
Yeah, it's been getting more. Honestly, I don't think that either one of these platforms is going to be stable until they stop picking sides. They are media platforms.
Themselves?
I don't think they can. I mean, this new CEO of Twitter made statements that said very clear he wants to control what people are seeing and guide them to the right things. Well, who is he to say what the right things are? These platforms need to stop censoring people. They need to stop picking sides. When a platform allows the Taliban to have active Twitter accounts, but not the former president of the United States, this is media gone horribly wrong.
I would agree. Now, Enes Kanter, I believe his name is, the basketball player. We've talked about him before. He changed his name to Freedom or something of that nature. And the reason I bring that up, because I think it's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a real dynamic between him and LeBron James. What do you think of that? I think it's going to play out increasingly.
I think it will. Kanter has stood up against China, against the NBA's contracts with China, against Nike using slave labor in China. This past week, he became a U.S. citizen. And at his citizenship swearing in, he changed his last name to Freedom. This is, everybody talks about, we have to have open borders. We have to feel sorry for the people who are coming in. No. This is the type of person we want to come here. This is the type of person who has seen what the evils of socialism do, what dictators do, and he's not afraid to stand up. And he comes here and he says, the United States is the greatest country because it offers you the chance to be free, to say what you want. And he's not going to give that right up. And he's not going to kowtow to the NBA or to the Chinese government like the NBA has been kowtowing.
Or to LeBron James.
Or to LeBron James or corporate sponsors.
That'll be interesting. I wonder what happens in terms of endorsements. Does he become an anti-hero at this point? It'll be interesting to see. The Fed is now running out of money. Unless the Senate votes to extend the debt limit, which why even have a debt limit? I mean, it's like it's like an alcoholic saying, "I just no, I'm going to have one more drink," and then like 5 drinks later. What's the point? When you really think about it.
At this point, there really isn't any reason to have a debt limit. I mean, we keep voting to extend it over and over again.
What's the point?
Warren Buffett said years ago, just abolish the debt limit because you're obviously not paying attention to it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's all show.
Yeah, originally it had a point when people were fiscally responsible. That was all we could spend. We had to watch this. But over the years, it's just become routine to extend it over and over again.
The last time we cared about the national debt was 40 years ago, like the 1980s. That was it. When the debt limit,
in the late 90s, we cared about it under the Clinton administration.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. But so 30 years ago was the last time we cared.
Yeah,
I mean, how do you get $30 trillion? And George W. Bush was no genius either. So there's a blame to go around.
No, there's loads of blame. There's blame for George W. There's blame for Barack Obama. There's blame for Donald Trump. There's blame for Joe Biden.
The main thing is there's no ramifications, Dr.
That's the problem. What was really important to remember is that when we had the debt under control, we had a Democratic president and a Republican Congress working together. They have not worked together since.
30 years, yes. So you had the drive-by massacre. Interesting. The media is not really talking much about that. And moreover, I don't know if he's capable of doing it, but Biden is not going to visit the grieving families. Could it be that it doesn't fit their narrative? White racist?
It doesn't fit their narrative. In fact, many of the liberal media referred to this as a car crash or an accident. They tried to blame the police, saying he was fleeing the police. None of this is true. And of course, if there's any listeners out there that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, this is the massacre, the Christmas parade massacre in Waukesha. Yeah. And Biden is not going, and the liberal media refuses to report that it was a criminal who was out on bail, $1,000 bail. He was out after being charged with running over his wife with the same SUV that he
Yeah.
crashed into the parade with. This
Yes.
They don't
But
want
you
to
have it.
talk about this because it absolutely blows out of the water everything they're talking about: defund the police, about bail reform, these prosecutors that are going easy on criminals. It blows all of their story out of the water.
Okay, but there is an aspect of having moral integrity and compassion. I find it very cold, which I think Biden is extremely cold. I think that whole lunch pail Joe and commuter Joe was the biggest bunch of bullshit ever spewed on the American population. He's a cold-hearted son of a bitch. He proved that when the bodies came home from Afghanistan, and he's proving it again. A political agenda. Reagan didn't care who was on the space shuttle, if they were Democratic or Republican. May not be the greatest example, but sometimes as president, he was supposed to be the great uniter. Bullshit.
Right. I mean, let's look back at what presidents are supposed to do. I mean, you mentioned the Challenger explosion, and Reagan went to the families. Up here in Sandy Hook, when that massacre took place, the president came here and visited with families. When the U.S. coal was blown up, President Clinton went and met with the families. This is something that every president has done, regardless of party, and Biden seems to be completely unable to do it. He showed no sympathy for the soldiers that died in Afghanistan. He's shown no sympathy for these folks. It is absolutely amazing. We have a president and a vice president who seem to be completely incapable of relating to people.
Well, because for him, he's been a let's just say a political robot before I was born, almost. So
Yeah,
that's
but
what he is.
I don't think this has anything to do with him as a politician. I think it has to do with him as a person. Yes.
I think you're actually
remember,
right.
We talked about this a number of weeks ago when we were talking about what was going on in Afghanistan. Back during the Obama administration, he said we should just pull out. And he was questioned about what that would do to the Afghani people. And his response was, F them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also looking at your watch, I mean, and then he had the audacity to talk. He always friggin' talks about Bo. Like no one's had any tragedy in their life. He's talking to the families, and he's hearkening back to Bo. It's like, shut the F up with Bo already.
He has absolutely no sympathy. He has absolutely no empathy. And I don't think it has anything to do with his politics. I think this is him as a person.
I would agree. I stand corrected. You are 100% correct. Couple other things. Talking about the debt ceiling, there's more speculation that Manchin and others, and plus Biden's just crumbling political infrastructure, no pun intended, that there may be some problems with it getting through the Senate, at least as it is. That's almost a given.
Well, there's no way it's going to pass as it is. Manchin has already said that. If it passes, they are going to take a lot out of this. And they need to. But I think what's even more telling is I have seen recently a number of high-level Democrats, including Biden, Pelosi, and Harris, talk about why this bill is important. And what I find absolutely incomprehensible is the fact that everything they talk about that America needs, that they want to provide, is all from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, not from Build Back Better. It's like they're trying to sweep this under the rug and convince the American people.
It's bait and switch.
Yes.
Bait and switch. That's
exactly.
all it is.
They're telling people what this is going to do for them, and it's not going to do any of it because what they're talking about is actually in the infrastructure bill that has already been passed and signed.
And by the way, in spite of a liberal media, the bill's actually underground or underwater in terms of popularity. I think it might just be a reflection on Biden, but you don't never know.
Well,
Uh,
part of it's a reflection on Biden, but part of it is that the Democrats have vastly underestimated the intelligence of the American people. And the American people know when you spend a lot of government spending raises inflation. And every time the American people go to the supermarket, go to the store, they are facing the fastest rising inflation in 30 years. They don't want more inflation. They're afraid that this bill is going to make the daily groceries absolutely unaffordable.
No question. Most Americans forgot, and maybe weren't even around during the hyperinflationary periods of the late 80s, late 70s, early 80s, which almost broke the back of the American economy. We were talking about 25% interest rates. Speaking of the Democratic Party and their amazingly talented bench, Mayor Pete seems to be like the one that's he has the throne now. Someone that was a mayor of a shit ass city, didn't do jack. It was worried about parental leave during the supply chain disasters, and he's the standard bearer. Not a good look.
No, it's not a good look. I mean, let's face it. Mayor Pete is the one making the rounds. One, because infrastructure falls under his department, so he's the one that's supposed to be pushing this. But more importantly, he actually has the ability to talk. And
Yeah.
Biden has shown he can't, if he goes off script, it's a disaster. Harris has shown she can't talk to people at all. So they're looking for somebody who can. What I find even more frightening is, they're giving him the spotlight, but recent information that's come out is that the party is actually looking to Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama to run for 2024 if Biden steps aside, which tells me they are still more concerned with ticking off the diversity boxes than finding someone who is capable of doing the job.
I would agree, and no one's going to vote for that ticket, by the way. Under the hot spotlight, Michelle Obama melts. She looks good when she's on Oprah and about home cooking and all that. No, she's not ready for prime time. Sorry, and I don't think people want Obama part 2. I think we're good with that. Let's finish up on the Maxwell trial. You talk about liberal media bias. It's really funny. I was watching CNN. They were talking about the trial, and of course they said, "Oh, Trump was on the Lolita Express," but they never mentioned the fact that Clinton was on it like 30 times. Hello.
Yeah, Bill Clinton and Bill Gates have all been tied up in this. The liberal media does not want to show this. There is actually a picture that is circulating now from Chelsea's wedding, and this sex trafficker woman is sitting right there at Chelsea's wedding. So I honestly think this is why there are no cameras in the courtroom, because
you're right.
Liberal media does not want what this person can
100%.
say to get out. And in fact,
done.
They were yelling that, it's unfair that she was kept in prison. She had offered a bail in the amount of $27 million. And the judge and the prosecutor denied this. They fought it to keep her remanded to prison until the trial started. If you are willing to pay $27 million in bail, it means you have more than enough to flee the country. She was a flight risk. She was the perfect example of someone who should have been remanded to custody. But the liberals are going, oh, it's because she was a woman and they should have let her go out on bail. No, this is a sex trafficker who, quite frankly, had Epstein cut a deal, would have thrown her under the bus, and everything she's done will come out.
Agreed. Well, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. Our listeners can access us in many points, can't they?
You can find every episode at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website. We're also available on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners.
We'll see you next week.